And where is the video? Okay, and let's go ahead and do it.
Can you guys hear me right now?
It's not working. It's not working. It is.
Are we live?
Yes. And welcome to another episode of Afromations. I am your host, Nehesu Hunter L. And we have a very serious, sensitive subject that we are going to talk about this evening, and that is dealing with domestic violence, especially during this era of the pandemic that we have during the area of racial justice and within a pandemic of COVID-19. And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest panel. I'm going to introduce the guest panel according to how I see them on my screen. We have Bakari. He is a community activist. That's our brother Bakari over there. Could you raise your hand and give him a high five, Bakari, if you can see him? And we have Safensa. She's a community activist, very well connected within our community, and a musician that she might want to eventually hook up with my other sister over here, which is Summer D. You see on the screen, Darlene. Welcome. And we have Dr. Wazi, who helped put this together from the Center of African, from the Center from Sac State, who the funding comes from, the Center for African Peace Conflict Resolution. And Dr. Ernest has worked in Nigeria and Sac State to try to bring together conflict resolution from both continents. And so I would like to introduce Dr. Wazi before we get further into our show. But before I do that, in the description, you should be able to find our PowerPoint and some other utensils that we'll be using tonight that include resources and questions in an article that I find that we compiled together that I think you'll find helpful. So before we get into this serious conversation, I would like to give Dr. Wazi the opportunity to explain some of the project that he has here and that we are doing here, and with a little bit of background music. So Dr. Wazi, could you explain to us briefly about the project that this podcast is supporting?
Yes, thank you very much, Brother Nehesu and ladies and gentlemen and fellow panelists. This is part of the ongoing project on the 2020 Domestic Violence Prevention and Intervention Task Act with the City of Sacramento and the Center for African Peace and Conflict Resolution at California State University is pleased to be a sponsor of it. So look forward to the discussions as we move forward. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Wazi, for joining us and for this opportunity to initiate this serious conversation. It wasn't on my radar. It wasn't my radar at all. Because we were focusing on our podcast. Last two podcasts was criminal justice and police reform and the prison pipeline that we have. And so thank you for bringing this forward. And without further ado, I would like to, if you are looking into our description, you'll be able to find the presentation or kind of something that's going to guide our conversation. And so what I have here is I will just be going down here, and I'll be using this as an opportunity to guide our discussion. So in here you will find some legal definitions, types of domestic violence, data studies of domestic violence, and some resources. Some of the questions that we will cover tonight is how or why has COVID-19 impacted our community, the Black community? What is racism's role in responding to domestic violence during COVID-19? How does racism generate violence in our intimate relationships? And how to stop the beatings to save the marriage or the destructiveness within the relationship. And also we'd like to look at, and hopefully we have a guest that, or one of our panel guests that comes on who works in the prisons to discuss about how do we know about the inmates, people who are convicted with domestic violence situations and they're incarcerated, and what programs do they have to support them, and kind of looking at some of those repeat offenders and some of the data and statistics within that. And also we like to provide you resources because we see a lot of problems, but we also would like to provide you resources on how to handle those situations. And as we see, domestic violence is ever increasing. And domestic violence types, we could talk about control, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and intimidation, isolation, verbal abuse, coercion, threats, and blame, using male privilege, and of course, economic abuse. So as we get into this, I would like to, we already know the situations are arising the statistics are rising during this period of time, and you could use some of that we're showing in the introduction, and you could use the link at the bottom of our in our description to kind of further get a good idea about some of those data, some of that data. Oops. So with that said, I would like to go ahead and enter the conversation using one of these prompters here. Like why do you think COVID-19 has impacted and created a more issues of domestic violence? So let's go ahead and talk about that so some of our viewers can be as we warm up to some of the heavier things. Would like anybody like to share? Safinsa, are you interested in chiming in on your point of view on why do you think some of the statistics that show the increase of domestic violence and kind of and also would like you to introduce yourself as we get into this. You can turn your microphone off. You might want to turn your microphone on, dear. There you go, love.
How's everybody doing this evening?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I am Safinsa Arias. I am a community activist, artist in the Sacramento area. We are also a proprietor of a couple of businesses in the Sacramento area, Mama's Market, which is a urban grocery store, boutique grocery store, and we have a wellness space called Sage, and we are the owners, me and my husband. I am thinking what I'm seeing or hearing a lot of, and actually firsthand seeing a lot of abuse now during the COVID is happening, of course, because people are spending a lot more time that they don't usually spend with spouses or significant others. They are having to see and look at themselves more or deal with who they really are. They don't have the other avenues of activities that would kind of mask actually having to deal with your spouse or who you are or actually have communication. They don't have those outlets. And so in turn, they are taking or having this abuse or this energy for lack thereof, or not having these outlets to be able to go and spend time with themselves or doing their normal activities, and so they're taking it out on each other. I think I think that's one of the biggest things, and then of course the economy. You know, your economical situation. You know, whether you're able to earn. That's stressful for some people, especially if they're already in a stressful environment. You know, sometimes being in urban areas, and we are talking about Black people, um, sometimes it's just stressful, and now really not being able to earn or take care of the family, or being, if you're the breadwinner, it's stressful for some people, and so they're taking it out on each other. That's what I'm thinking.
Thank you. Is anybody else interested in chiming in? I think that's a very acute analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you see a lot of these things that we'll get into a little further about some of the examples and so forth. Bakari, as being a brother, you know, being a breadwinner, or let's just assume, um,
Right.
you know, how do you think that this situation has impacted your income, and what does that do to you as being a male? And why do you think males are prone to react this way, as she potentially described as a cause for some of these outbursts of anger and so forth? Bakari, you're on. We're asking you a question. Can you hear us? Okay, maybe not. So, as a man, I know that oftentimes I feel like my identity is wrapped up in my job.
Wow.
You could read Bakari the subtitles, the closed caption. As a man, my identity, I feel, is tied up in how I produce and what I produce for my children, and how I could and what I could do to, it's just what I do and how I'm connected. What can I do as a man if I'm not bringing home the bacon? It's not kosher, but my identity is wrapped up in that, and I don't feel as significant as a man when I don't bring home money, even though I have children
Right.
and I have a relationship with an awesome wife that seemed my ego and myself tends to deflate, and
Right.
maybe society has me thinking that that's the only thing I contribute to a marriage or a relationship. But I know that
Right.
men's identity is greatly tied to being a breadwinner or to being somebody who has to provide for their kids or they're useless. And that is one reason. And I think that with the unemployment rate increasing has most definitely lost, it has an impact on the average income, and the stimulus checks aren't cutting it.
Right.
So that's how I would take
Mm-hmm.
that. I know, Bakar, you can't hear me, but we can hear you when you unmute your mic if you want to say something from reading the subtitles.
I want to also add that um, what I'm also finding in abuse during this COVID, or the a rise in abuse, especially in our neighborhoods, some of us don't really have the tools to counteract the stressful situation. A lot of us are not big into meditation. A lot of us, you just don't have the tools, and sometimes you need those things to help you deal with the stressful situation of not being able to provide on a platform that you usually are able to, or not having the finances to take care of. I mean, because everybody's going through it. Everybody's stressed out. Everybody, and when you've not had to deal with that, and you've not had a chance to actually equip yourself with the proper tools like meditation, communication, talking with a friend, going for a walk, exercising. A lot of people are facing the fact that they don't have that, and with not having those tools brings the frustration, the miscommunication, and the abuse. Those things are happening, and that's one of the reasons, you know.
Yeah, Darlene, feel free to chime in at any time. Please share your experience, if you will. You're on mute, dear. There you go.
So yeah, what the sister said, Chef Spencer said, yeah, absolutely. Tools are needed, um, but also we're dealing with a lot of different people with a lot of different paradigms. Um,
Yeah.
I'm stressed out, but I wouldn't beat anybody. I have male friends that are stressed out, but they would never beat anybody. Um, so it takes me to, um, you know, understanding the paradigm. How did you get in a situation where you thought this was a good idea or this was okay, and then the receiver, the recipient, whether it's a male or female being abused, how did you get in a situation where you thought it was okay and this was acceptable? So there's so many levels of why. I was sharing with a friend yesterday about stress and life as we are experiencing it now. And it reminded me of that old saying, the survivor of the fittest, meaning, we have to get it together. We have to get grounded. As Sister said, we have to meditate. We have to have our chakras in line. We cannot approach life as it exists and as it will exist as we go forward
There we
in a
go.
toxic environment. And the environment I'm speaking of is inside of us. We cannot be toxic from within.
Yeah.
We have to be able to walk upright and understand um, our boundaries, our boundaries, as human beings.
That is pretty deep. that is very deep. You know, so that is I don't even know what to say. Within, and I would like to go deeper in that, but let's warm up. And I want to ask you, ladies, and Bakari and gentlemen, what? How do you think racism generates violence in our intimate relationships and dealing with domestic violence? How do you think that? How do you think that just dealing with us as being melanated people dealing with domestic violence and racism as a part of what a woman would have to go through, or a man, if that's the case?
Um, yeah, can I answer that?
Please do.
Address that?
Please do.
Just a little bit. I think that image is image. When you deal with a person or persons who see themselves lower than or less than, you never know how they're going to react or how they handle relating to another person. Again, the boundaries are taught as children. You know, good healthy boundaries are taught as children. If those aren't in place,
Right.
and, you know, Spencer, if you're telling your child, "Oh, you're stupid, you're an idiot, you don't know anything," well, that boy is going to grow up
That's
repeating,
right.
parroting that to his children, and he's also going to exhibit those behaviors with his love relationship. So if he doesn't get it together, you know, I'm not all of them do. Some of them come out and, you know, get some, you know, figure it out, but many of them do not. And the abuser usually has actually mimicked their fathers or grandfathers in the abusing. Um,
You know what you saying that it's interesting because in a lot of my work that we do in the community there's a lot of advocacy for children and children programs and youth adults, but what's missing, I believe, heavily in our community is resources for the parents. With that paradigm that you're talking about, that thought process, that type of conditioning, there has to be some type of resources to help these adults, these parents, because if they're if they're raised badly like that,
mhm,
what's automatically going to happen is that they're going to raise their children like that. It's going to be a generational curse.
mhm,
So there has to be enough resources and emphasis on adult health care and mental health care. And it doesn't have to be a stigma. It doesn't have to have the thing of just mental work. It just has to be reprogramming. Better parenting. You want to get out of your situation. There is not enough resources for adults. There's just not. And I think that especially for melanated adults between 30, 40, even 50, there's even some 60-year-olds that need some resources to rethink this new thing. Because like you said, it's a new thing now. We will never go back to the old. It has to be a new way of thinking. It has to be simpler. It has to be more mental based. You have to have these tools in place to continue on to 2021 because it's never going to be the same. And a lot of people mentally can't handle that. They cannot get that in place. That we have to learn something new, and it has to be resources for that. It has to be something that teach black men to let them know that it's not spooky, it's not religious, it's not something super spiritual to meditate.
meditation is the key. Going with
Okay,
the key.
all young men and young boys and brothers and grandfathers, we all need to take on energy of meditating. We
Absolutely.
need to take on a meditation of getting one with nature, gardening, taking our kids out on trails, trips, and treks and stuff like that. We have, but those things aren't. They're not talked about. We're making such emphasis on. Oh, are you going to get that stimulus check? Oh, Oh, are you going to get that PPL money? Or are you going to get the everything is money based when it's actually really more simpler than that.
Yeah.
You we need to change the way we think. It needs
Correct.
to be family based, it needs to be friend based. They have us so far and divided and so far of what we should be getting back to as far as simple living,
Mm-hmm.
nature based, you
Mm-hmm.
know, getting back to where we can actually function.
Right.
And I'm saying if we don't do a quick turn, we're gonna get swallowed. It's gonna swallow us. I see it every day. People are getting swallowed up whole because they don't understand what this new way of thinking is. This new way of earning money. You can't just think you're about to go to a 9 to 5. I told people this before COVID started. You're gonna need to take some of that extra money and start you a small business, some, something that you're crafty at that people are going to need, something that's going to be essential. I said this before COVID, and no one wanted to listen. Now, all of these jobs and positions that are stressing these people out, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Am I going all the things that we should have been prepping or getting prepared, buying land, purchasing land together, purchasing food together, all those things. That's our new normal.
Mm-hmm.
That's real.
Work it
Those
out.
are the things we're going to have to put in place to be less stressful, to be less abusive, to have idle time to just do crazy shit. Excuse my French, but that's the way I feel because it's that serious. You know, those are the things. And if we don't have those resources, I mean, can we talk about that? Where are those resources to have that type of programming for the new normal? You know, that's the way I feel, you know.
Yeah, we. I don't speak French. That's the only French I knew, and that's real. And I think there are some resources out there, and they are very reactionary and non-rehabilitative. I agree with you on that. And
Yeah.
and there are some resources that we'll get to as far as how somebody can help get into that, to get
Yeah.
into, to like when if they're experiencing this situation, you know,
Right.
um, we have some resources available. And I just want to say thank you, ladies, for joining this because I'm a man, and men could
Mm-hmm.
be. I'm not to take away from the women suffrage, but as a man too, there's men could also experience some of these things. But I thank you for allowing me into the conversation, into the womanhood of the experience of this. Is there a way when with all those things that are going on, if somebody is experiencing domestic violence, is there a way to save the marriage? How do we change the relationship to save the marriage instead of having to
Mm.
leave? And not all situations, obviously, are going to be available for that.
Mm. That's tough because every situation is different. That's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah. Every situation is different because each person's paradigm is different. And I remember in my particular situation, which my situation pales to many other people who've been, you know, um, who have had to deal with domestic abuse. My situation pales, but I
Mm.
did have a situation.
Well, just go ahead
Um,
and get into it, ladies. If you would like to go ahead and get into it, might as
my,
well.
I remember um, we were having an argument, and my son was jumping up and down on the bed. Just jumping up and down on the bed. He was a toddler, and
Mm-hmm.
the argument kept escalating. And then he was jumping up and down on the bed. That energy, he was taking in that energy, and then he fell. He jumped, and then he jumped off the bed and he fell. It wasn't a big deal. There was carpet there, but his dad, being a reactionary, just grabbed him up and took him into the other room. And I went behind his dad, like, no, 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 because I thought he was going to hit him. I said, no, no, don't hit him, don't hit him. And I wasn't really hitting my, ex or ex now, but I was just, on his back. No, no. He put my son down and he hit me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a Sunday morning, and I'll remember clearly. And I called 911. And
Mm.
I was so afraid because if I had thought it through, I probably wouldn't have called 911 because I didn't want him to take my son, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I called 911 and they said, you guys need to calm down. This is a beautiful neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. You know what they do. And they left.
Yeah.
But then I called her on Monday. I called that police officer on Monday because she told me, call me, if you ever get a minute. I called her and spoke to her. She told me, she said, if ever you're ever in a situation like that, it never changes. She said, they do not change. That was her perspective, that they do not change. And that stayed with me. But I had this tyranny in my head because
Yeah.
part of my paradigm was at that time was the church. And I can
Uh-huh.
tell you scenarios that go
Mm-hmm.
all the way back to like the 70s and 60s of these were older women that used to teach us and tell
To
us,
stay.
"Oh, stay with your husband. It's okay.
Right.
Pray through it. Everything's going to work out."
Correct.
And there were women that, like I said, my situation pales, but there were women who stayed under heavy, heavy abuse from their
Mm-hmm.
spouse because the church told them that Jesus was going to make it right. So that's a
Right.
problem, and I hope somebody hears me out there because I have so much to say about that whole experience in
Speak
dealing
on it,
with
sister.
indoctrination. I have so much to say. Um, and
Nick,
how of they were following the voice of a man and sometimes a voice of an elder sister, elder like an evangelist or something, said, I went through that. My husband was drunk all the time and he used to beat me every night. And then I just kept praying and all of a sudden he turned to Jesus and everything's fine. Well, she's 70 now, he's 75, and
Of course.
everything's fine.
Right.
All of that,
Yeah.
So, you know,
with 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 that
uh,
with that said, may I introduce the audience to something that I found that I felt is very helpful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to see if I can add it up here. I don't know how I can do it. I'm gonna try to share by clicking on an article, and I just think this point needs to be chimed in a little bit more. As you can see, I'm trying to navigate a whole lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to chime in on that particular item there. And here is an article, and this article is within that the description of resources that you should be able to have hyperlinks to. And it says it's published in November 2017. The Violent State: Black Women's Invisible Struggle Against Police Violence. And this also talks not just about police violence, it goes through a historical perspective. I really want to give these people a lot of shots out for this study. I read parts of this and I was been exposed. And I have my story I would like to share eventually if I get opportunity. But it talks about women as liars, women, and just the way that women are seen and the racial aspect of that. Black women are raped and sexually assaulted by police and so forth. And we're in this time of trying to find racial justice and within this pandemic of domestic violence. But when those people who are to protect you are not there or they are not protecting you, and when you have to file a report, you have to do X, Y, and Z, you are immediately looked at a certain way that you have to defend yourself and viewed in a certain way. First, you have to defend yourself as a black woman, or as and how you're victimized. It just goes on because the portrayal of black women, as we know, is very sexual. The Sarah Bartman, kind of big booties and shaking it and stuff, because those are the images that we see. Through the historical view, I want to take a look on page 45, and I want to highlight this. Is everybody able to see this?
Mm-hmm.
So in here, I want to read an excerpt from this. It says, "For a society that considers itself to be Christian, it was necessary for whites to be able to justify the raping, maiming, and killing period descriptions and stereotypes about blacks played heavily in literature and news of today. Black women were violent savages, or black women were lascivious and wild creatures without morals who needed to be tamed in order to get any work out of them. The use of such language reassured whites who may have been uncertain about the legitimacy of unholding human beings in captive, of holding them captive. Sorry, that these individuals were not, in fact, human, but closer to the animal family. Such was the case through the end of the Civil War in 1865, which represented almost exactly 200 years of law normalizing violence against blacks, black men, and black women. So I just wanted to give you a brief history within this article of what you're saying and how we have been subjected to a paradigm to view ourselves and our spirituality through a preconceived or manufactured device that was used against us. Not to say all Christianity is bad, but it has most definitely had some kind of negative connotation to our spirituality. And I just wanted to touch on that because I think that's very big within that, because we also know in the Islamic world there's big issues with that too in other areas. So I just really wanted to highlight some research in an article that talked about the historicity of police violence with black women, and then as we go forward in our discussions of, you said you called 911. What was that experience like once you called them? And please, all participants who, if you're not speaking, please turn your microphones on mute until you have the opportunity to speak, and then that way we won't get feedback. So please, Darlene, please enhance on that subject.
Yeah, so, I didn't think it through. I think my first reason that I called 911 was to get him back. Like, how dare you? I'm going to tell. And I am a whistleblower. I will blow the whistle. I have no problem with that. But that was why I did it. And the only thing it did was it connected me to the police officer, the female police officer that I actually spoke with, that Monday from my office when I called her, and she gave me her advice. She was like saying, look, we see these situations over and over and never change. And that stayed in the back of my mind because I saw how he would get angry. His anger just out of nowhere, just crazy. So I wasn't the type to take that on. And, that's like what Chef was saying. You've got women who will take that on and think it's their fault because of their paradigm. I didn't have that paradigm. I knew that this is not good. I'm not going to take this for, forever. I'm not. I'm going to separate myself from the situation before it escalates to something else, So a lot of women don't have that because these women that I've spoken to women who are in situations like that, abusive situations, and they have a hard time coming out. They think it's okay, that it's their fault. And you've probably seen that on television. You've seen the best example I have is Dr. Dre and Michelle. When she was married to him, he would beat her. And she said the reason why she stayed is because her mother taught her when she was little that it was okay. It meant that a man loved you. So her paradigm was ignorance, okay? And so she tried to live through that. Okay, it's okay for me to stay here and accept this abuse because he's showing me how much he loves me. Okay. So you got, it's deeper. It's deeper than calling up somebody and saying, I got some resources for you. Because everybody that's listening to that information is receiving it differently. They still want brother man. I don't want to mention any names, but so and so running into the court, Bobby, and after the fighting and stuff, they just kept going, and I don't even know what that was. I believe they loved each other. I just think that they had a whole bunch of stuff going on, substance abuse, all kinds of things going on. But I really do think there was deep love there, that was being interfered with.
That's a interesting definition of love, and I think that's interesting. And you want to get back at him. And the word I miss says lascivious, and I said some other word. I was just caught in what I was reading, and the word that seems that we do call police, and we try to get help. We get some kind of help, but then we want brother man. We want him back. He could be the breadwinner, and he could be somebody that's financially keeping you back. And so we have another guest that just showed up, Nia Brown. Welcome and joining us in our conversation. If you would like to introduce yourself, we would love to have you. And you, as you hear some of this dialogue, and could you please give us a little bit of your background? Because as we're talking about help, turn your camera off. There we go. As we talk about help and everything, my sister, and you're on mute, could you please give a little bit about your background, what you do, because we're going into, as you hear the direction of our conversation, please.
Well, good evening. Couldn't tell what device was on, off, or otherwise, and I see some familiar faces, so good evening. Forgive me if the angle's weird because I can't tell if I'm fully in the camera, but anyway, my background is I've been a school counselor for the last, 25 or 30 or so years. And my background is also in marriage, family, and child counseling, as I have a master's degree as a marriage, family, and child therapist. And I also teach at Sac State. I teach off and on child and family psychopathology. So, and I'm a very observant person. And I also, within my own personal situation with domestic violence when I was a child. So, that's a lot of years of observing and trying to intervene and support children and families as best I can. And of course, with that lens of our people and what we are grappling with in terms of ancestral memory and our position in society is often that of an abused child or an abused domestic partner.
So can you please, and thank you again for being so transparent, and thank you for letting us men into the conversation, because it's kind of awkward for me. I have my experience of childhood domestic violence and being observant of that, never a participant of that, but could you give us a little background of you share a little into your story? Because I assume that some of your childhood background and what you've seen kind of led to some of the work that you do, and could you and some of the help and advice and strengths that you pick and tools that you picked up along the way to get you out of that situation and to have healthy marriage?
I think I observed as a kid some intermarriage, turmoil, challenges, and hostilities and whatnot. My mom has a different memory than I do. And I think also growing up in the schools where, as one of the only kids of color, there's a certain undertone or completely camouflaged level of abuse that I'll speak for myself, that I didn't know how to exactly handle. And I figured out ways to handle it. So I kind of spent a lot of time thinking about how do we get out of these situations? How do we get in this situation? And so, that pretty much led me into the field of counseling. That's often what happens. When you have your own trauma, you gravitate towards fixing it and figuring out what happened. You're often your own subject in classes or, groups that you're required to be a part of. So then in going through marriage, family, and child counseling, often we were told that not many people make it out with the same relationship intact, unless it was super healthy to begin with. I wasn't in a relationship, so that didn't apply. So I could take my tools and try to do the best I could. But then, of course, that left me as a fixer for my parents and an observer for my parents. And as much as I loved them, I just wished them divorced. And they did not divorce ever. But my dad did leave, and he subsequently he passed. He was ill when he left. He passed away in a whole different state. So my entire childhood was spent with a lot of turmoil, and so I really tried to avoid that as an adult. Not that I necessarily did so successfully. However, I had one domestic abuse situation. I was not married to the individual. I tried to fight back, and I found myself being told that I was a perpetrator by law enforcement, that it was mutual combat. And because I defended myself, I was a perpetrator. So I chose to go to Weave and see what that experience was like. It was absolutely horrible. I never wanted to be a perpetrator or a victim again. So any kind of sense of being in a state of hostage, hostility, or fear of my physical safety, I bounced. I pretty much bounced. I wasn't in that situation again. So then it was really helpful for me as a school counselor to be able to help kids escape situations of being bullied. So who's a bully? Who's a bully? I believe society is a bully with folks of color, and we learn to take it unless we deprogram ourselves and our kids and our families. So even now, working in the school district, I often say racism is bullying. Why are we having such a problem with this? Why is it such a hard concept to stop? So that's in a nutshell my experience with the psychopathology of abuse and power relationships, race relationships, and trying to working to empower our kids to see something different, and also understanding what the kids are telling me as a counselor. And they're telling me, Miss Brown, it's not that it's black that makes it a ghetto. It's that it ain't never gonna get fixed that makes it a ghetto. And that kid's middle school babies told me that years ago, 25 to be exact. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I wouldn't want it any other way. Well,
I didn't know I was going to speak this evening, so forgive me. But anyway, it's good to see you and hear the information that's being shared.
And yeah, thank you for joining us and being there for the babies. You know, these children. You know, they're just going through so much. You know, and to start off their relationships at a young age, from hearing what you're saying, already coming to you about this, and I've worked to high school administration, and you know, and I'm blown away at some of the things that they're doing and part of, and that they're aware of, and that they're exposed to. That, you know, I don't want to say I live in a bubble, but I do. I live in my reality. You know, and you know, I don't know. It's touching that those little babies are experiencing that, and that kind of goes to what Summer D's talking about, the perpetual. And Chef, you know, Safensa, you know, you're speaking of a lot of situations within the community. You're very connected into Sacramento community. Um, can you please respond to what Nia Brown just mentioned, discussed? You're on mute, by the way.
It's interesting when she mentioned that the baby said, you know, what makes it a ghetto is that it's never going to change. You know, as much as I hate it, that is the reality. You know, and that's not the reality that I want for any of our children, let alone our young adults or our elders. You know, but there has to be some type of responsibility in regards to how we react, you know, and that's just a fact. And there has to be some type of friendships, resources, whatever it is, people you know in the community that will take the time to re-instruct or reteach these things that have been learned, especially from some of our people that are supposed to be there, like officers of the law, people that we're supposed to depend on that are supposed to protect us. There has to be some type of reteaching. I by all means don't have the answers to trying to find a way for those people to connect with us and relearn and reteach and have new ways on how they handle these situations. Things like she said she had a bad situation with weed. That's interesting because I've heard that so many times, and I'm just wondering if those researchers like we are they even for melanated people? You know, um, I also wanted to go back. I wanted to go back further than that with
Please do.
what the sister was talking about. I wanted to ask you a question on who wrote that article that you had read. You
Okay.
said that was
Let me,
2017.
yes, ma'am. I'm trying to find it. It's within all these links I have here. Let me try to find it, please. Um,
Because I want to touch on.
it
I,
it is
I want to
by
say that
Mary and Joe William and Mary, Journal of Race, Gender, and Social Justice, Volume 2, Issue 1, Mary, William, and Mary, Journal of Women and Law, 2017 Special Enhanced Women's Effective Law Enhancement,
so,
Enforcement.
I'm gonna assume, which I don't usually do, that they're white who wrote that, right?
Just look it up.
So I'm gonna say that white people have this thing. Whenever something is written, it's so. I don't believe that. That's some shit that they made up. First of all, number two, we're gonna have to stop even reading those type of things, even introducing those type of things to our psyche as a community. We're gonna have to stop because what usually happens, people start to believe those things. They start to believe those entities, and we have to make, I mean, a hell of an effort to start writing our own narrative, start writing our own stories, start writing things, and just we have to start because a lot of those things in that article, don't, I mean, those were extremely hurtful things, hurtful statements. And sometimes when you have an individual that is weak, and I'm talking about a melanated person, they could start believing some of those things, you know. And it's the sad that I'm going to say that they'll really start believing it because a white person wrote them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they are or not. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
sure if they are or not. And I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with changing the narrative. You know,
you know,
I,
I,
I do.
it,
I do
go ahead.
think, though, yes, sister, I do think that you're right, rechanging the narrative, and I do think it's very important on how we are viewed. And I do think oftentimes we do not control our narrative in the media and other places. I'm just not to disagree at all. I'm just trying to add to what you're saying because I believe what you're saying is
Oh,
so
I hear you.
right on.
Yes,
You know, I'm adding to what you're
and
saying.
yes, yes.
In
And
it,
so when we're having these type of forums, I think at the end we should all. I mean, personally, what I try to do when I'm always in one of these talks or in these Zoom meetings or in these community talks, I have to take a social effort on my part to say, what am I going to do to change the narrative? You know, what what is my promise to my community? It could be something small. It could be something that I'll write a short story in this regard, in this realm we're talking. I can do something like some type of outreach, but we have to have more action. We have to have more promise to our community on what we're going to actually actively work on. You know, I hear these things. I hear these type of stories and these type of articles, and they bother me. They bother me because this is actual research, but not really in our words. And I don't want to keep dwelling on that, but it's just a fact. Though, I mean, who gets to say who we really are but us? And I think it's not enough of us saying, kill all of that old crap. We're no longer going to live, read, teach, reintroduce that. We're no longer reading those things. This is what we're doing now. And I think it's the same thing in regards to how we are reacting in abuse wise. Okay, you have somebody that's been an abuser. I think everybody has a chance to change. If you really want to, you can. If you really have, but you have to be aware also that, okay, I'm having some issues. Are there enough of us pointing that out to people? Because sometimes we could see some things and just be passive. Oh, I saw him being abusive to her. Oh, I caught him talking crazy. Oh, I saw her being edgy with him. Oh, I saw the soft push. But we don't interact enough to say, you know what? I don't think that's healthy behavior. Because if enough of us start pointing out stuff, so where do we get the courage to do so? Is what I'm saying. Where do we get the courage to have real conversations with adults, with people that we come in contact that we love to say, you know what, I saw something the other day and I didn't like it, and I think that that's a bad pattern and that could go bad. How do we do that? Do we have enough courage to do that? Are there enough of us saying things? Because I believe Summer, when you said in church, the women are taught to just stay with it. You know, put Jesus first. Jesus gonna work it out, and we know that doesn't happen all the time. That just doesn't happen. Where do we get the courage to say, I saw you were a little abusive, and I'm pointing it out because I don't want it to go the wrong way. And if you need someone to talk to, where do we get the courage? Because I think that that's a really big element that's missing. I think that's one of the biggest things why people continue with abuse, because people are allowing it. People in the circle that see it are allowing it. They don't get involved.
Hmm. The floor is
Hey,
open.
Jesus, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm sorry for the technical issues I was having. I'd like to chime in too. It's good to see Mia here and everything, and just all the stories have been told. I was wondering, we talk a lot about restorative justice in schools, right? Mm-hmm. I know you probably heard of that. Mm-hmm. And I've always said that we need it in schools, we need it in our community, and I don't know how that looks. We could have discussions about that, but I don't think that the churches any longer can play that role.
I don't either.
There's a lot of other issues there that churches just can't do. I mean, not saying all churches. I mean, some churches might do some beautiful things to really connect with people and help people, but we need that and other types of cultural practices in our communities that enable us to tell our story in an affirmation. It's not to ignore the past, because we did come under racism, and we need our kids to understand that we live in a racist society, a very toxic society. So we don't want to try to sugarcoat that or ignore it. But at the same time, understand what Shep was saying. We don't want it just to have these negative stories that's coming from the dominant culture, and we internalize that. We internalize that racism. We internalize the sexism. We do that. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of society we live in. Some of that is, some of us will say, well, I never attacked someone. I mean, I never, hit a woman or anything like that. But that doesn't mean that we don't live in a very toxic society that impacts people in very negative ways. And it's not just the ghetto that's not going to change. It's society as a whole is terribly, terribly bad. And we think because we have all these beautiful things, we got the iPhone and we got the TV and we got the big house, that's not cutting it. That's not a sign of civilization and progress. type of leadership that we have put up into office. I mean, all these signs are there. How we put money before people. The signs are there, and they you see what people do. What people are forced to do, or some things they're forced to do. Some things they do out of their control, under their control. Some things they do because they're messed up. They're hurting. Um, but we've internalized a lot of bad stuff, and I think that so for me, in terms of just maybe one little thing, I don't know who can do this, but just start having restorative justice circles in our own community. And I don't know how we get that started, but we need to have a place where we can come to talk to each other, not be talked at, because the preachers do that too much. That we come in and talk to each other and know that we have a safe place to go, that you don't have to call the cops. That's the last people that I want to call when there's problems. In my family, they never will probably get to that. We'll never get to that point in my family, but I'm saying that I'll be the last person I want to call the cops, and so I want to be able to have a community where we can call on each other and address conflict and address problems and just be with each other, just support one another. So
I agree.
Yeah. Can I weigh in a little bit?
Yes, sir. Obviously, yes. Please do.
Yeah. Sorry, I kind of lost contact for a few minutes there. I've been listening very intently and appreciate the comments and views expressed, and I think I agree with I think was Chef or someone made a comment that it's complex, it's complicated, has multiple layers, to it, and the work of the Center for African Peace and Conflict Resolution at California State University, Sacramento, which this project is under, is very mindful of those complexities, and part of this dialogue is what I believe is needed to not only unpack the issues but build allies, competencies, skills, and partnerships, at different levels. The faith community does have a role to play. In fact, tomorrow, another version of this dialogue will be taking place with 5 faith leaders from the African American community, or faith groups in Sacramento on the role of faith leader, or the role of the faith group in domestic violence prevention. Some nice comments definitely have come out in previous discussions we've had as to whether religion was being used to condone as against condemn violence in the home. There may be other people that are more equipped to understand that violence is not healthy for any relationship, or family for that matter, and goes against what, as a Christian, believe to be my Christian faith or doctrine in terms of positive humanity and non-violence. So this will come up again, again tomorrow, on being able to come to terms with that. I think by breaking the silence, which is what I'm hopeful this conversation is helping, because oftentimes it's something we don't want to talk about. It's very sensitive for many reasons. Nobody wants to be seen as airing their dirty laundry in public. It touches oftentimes on our basic sense of security or insecurity when it happens. But being able to do that, to break that silence in a way that is restorative, I think that's what Brother Bakari is alluding to, which is really at the heart of this particular project. Is very Afrocentric, meaning that it's one of collective interest, When it harms one, it harms all,
Mm-hmm.
and that the community has a role and responsibility. And by saying, I think Chefs was saying that when we can say, no, this is not cool, don't do that, but we still love you, brother or sister,
Mm-hmm.
that's how can we condemn this bad behavior and help you transform and get out of it without, but still value you as somebody we would like to have in our midst, as a contributing member of the community, is one where, again, I think Bakari is talking about restorative justice is really talks about. We can condemn the behavior as strongly as we can and must without necessarily condemning the person.
Mm-hmm.
Hold the person accountable for his or her misconduct and still be able to bring him or her in
Mm-hmm.
to the fold in a restorative, positive, manner. Uh, I don't want to suggest that it's easy, but it's one we know if we don't try it, we know what the outcome would be,
Mm-hmm.
right? I want to offer the services of the Center for African Peace and Conflict Resolution in this endeavor, and I hope that we can bring in more people to join us and be part of this endeavor. Not to say that we're going to be the only ones or that we are the only ones for that matter, but we can certainly build allies, create partnerships for our common purpose, really building a healthy family through healthy relationships. We want the violence to stop. And how can we do that and still restore that relationship? That whether it's a marital relationship or some other relationship that is valuable, that is important, that is significant, that is meaningful, that we would like to restore and maintain that. But that relationship cannot be healthy if there's violence in it. Not only for the quote survivor, the victim, but even for the perpetrator. Not to talk about people that witness it as children or other members of the family. So I appreciate the conversation and the thoughts and the sharing, as well as the invitation to partnership in this journey. Thanks very much.
Can I say something, Mahisa?
Yes, ma'am. Oh, let's keep it open. Keep it going. Yes, ma'am.
I believe it's maybe you guys have already started this a task force where we're addressing the youth and the adults at the same time, and of course add in our institutions of religion or other gatherings. But I don't know if any of you remember back in the day when we had the incubator with Sam Starks. We used to meet out there off of I think Darlene Garden Highway, was it? And so what if we started that back up? And the topic, we start off with just this issue or whatever this task force would say we need to start with, and we work on restorative justice or restorative circles because the schools have different definitions of what those are, and they're not all the way they should be. They're not all authentic, and so I think we'd also need to start with working in the schools, partnering with schools, maybe start at one or two schools. I can get you in there as the district head counselor for Elk Grove, and I can introduce you to the Sac City head counselor, but if we hit it from several angles, we can meet in the middle eventually.
Mm-hmm. I like that. In fact, we had applied, although not successful, to the Sierra Health Foundation grant a few weeks ago to do exactly that, to have restorative justice circles at 4 different sites, including Sackhead, Oak Park, Del Paso High, Meadowview, Mark Road area, to hear police reports indicates high levels of domestic violence cases. And of course, even though they're domestic violence cases, they also tend to involve other kinds of violent acts, including gun violence and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, we were not quite funded for that project. However, my team at Stack State and even other members in the community are determined, or it's very determined to look for other ways or other possible funding sources, to do that. And it does include the proposal does include one for high schools, select high schools, targeting again people of African descent. We're not saying others are not welcome, but purposefully, in terms of this particular project, we are really uh, making a very concerted effort with regard to people of African descent. And I think part of the comment Chef was saying before, to be able to um, write our narratives, take control over that. Mm-hmm. We're not necessarily saying that we are the best, so to say, but we are saying that oftentimes when others write about us, they don't quite capture the best in us as much as we want to do. So we can acknowledge the bad part of us, but also more importantly, say that there is much more goodness in us than the bad things that oftentimes are written. And to be able to take control of that and drive it, I think will provide an opportunity for kind of just a counter narrative that really goes a long way in terms of the psyche, in terms of the mental well-being, as well as our physical strength. So I welcome that, and maybe it will be one major proposal from this. We can follow up later on. Nia, nice to meet you. I live in Elk Grove. My kids, one graduate from Elk Grove High School, or one is finishing high school from Elk Grove High. So we can definitely take it up from there and how we can make it happen. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll be glad to connect you guys in the email after the show.
Jesus, I want to say that I really, really like what Bakari was saying as far as creating the spaces. I am offering Mama's Market as a safe space once a month. It could be even more, but between me and you, we know enough businesses that if enough of us offer safe spaces, so we could just have a talk once a month, and people are open to come and talk to each other, and it's a safe space. I'm offering Save and Mama's Market to be available for that. I think that's an excellent idea. I think it's comforting, it's warming to know that you can just be in a safe space and you can communicate with people. I mean, because everybody has bad days, you know. So and I think between me and you, we know enough businesses that maybe could also offer their space once a month and put it on the calendar where people could just come and check in and have a talk.
And how do people get it? Can you please? I want whoever's chiming in, please, Nia, 1 second. I want her to be able to get that information out. How could people get in contact with you in order to show up to enjoy your safe space?
You can contact me at chefsafensa@gmail.com or Mama's Market or mmfinefoods.com. You can contact that way, or you can take my number. It's 916-524-2782. You can give me a call. I'm available every day. So, and I can put that on the calendar as a consistent day that we do that once a month, every month. I'm good with that. And I have enough space. We have a 10,000 square foot facility that's outdoors as well that we can facilitate social distancing and all that. So we can accommodate. And I'll pay for it.
Thank you.
Wow. That's great. Two things. I follow up on that as well. Thank you. One of the things definitely that we have a curriculum for, I would be glad to provide a training, is on conducting those restorative justice circles or peace circles. To do it in a way that is, thoughtful, and also build a level of, competency so that when we are no longer around, it can continue. Because that's oftentimes, unfortunately, we try to do these things as quickly and and with, our blood, sweat, and tears, and then when we are gone, it's gone. How we can, Nia mentioned, Sam. I remember Sam Stack's, dialogues many years ago. When I came to Stack State 1991, we started with different groups in Oak Park area, especially organizing, rites of passage, because of our passion. But when either the funding is not there or the people are not around or one challenge comes up, these things tend to kind of die away. So definitely, to the extent we can build in, have a curriculum which we have, put in place and can conduct the training so that it can be sustainable and something that we can replicate. And that would be definitely a very solid role that the Center for African Peace and Conflict Resolution can provide. And yeah, jointly look for ways that we can look for funding to be able to continue to do those things. That'd be great too. Thank you.
Okay. We over here solving problems. I love that. Finding solutions. Nia, you were going to chime in and say something. I thought, and thank you, Dr. Wazi. I love where we're going with this.
One, I was wondering, and I'm sorry if I missed it when I was on YouTube watching what was going on. Is this a partnership or the potential of partnership with the existing safe spaces that came up around the time of Stephon Clark's murder? There were all these safe spaces that were coming in and out of town. So it's not the same. It's maybe in addition to. And we may want to partner with those established.
Yeah. In addition to in a partnership, I have at least a couple of them, particularly the Black Safe Space that Dr. Christy Higgins runs. Yeah. In fact, she had proposed to partner with us in the grants that I mentioned that we didn't quite get money for. But we'll definitely follow up on that because she does great work, and we are our Afrocentric modules will line up quite well. So it will be one of the collaboration partnership.
The second thing I was going to say, and then I'll put myself back on mute, is I'm pretty sure I can get spaces in the school district or at the schools, at least one, maybe three of the schools, to meet and either partner or present with BSU or Student Equity Council. Elk Grove is kind of still on the spotlight in terms of race relations. And it would be a really good time to say, hey, we have this partnership with Sac State. And so if we stay in touch, I can see what I can put together when school's back in session.
That's great.
Yeah, and I would like to also, I have some resources. We also know, Dr. Wazi, that Stockton also is the lack of support, and that's a city that was trying to make many recovery after they went bankrupt. So I'll be glad to find some other resources within to provide children's safe space, children, parents, and adults, and try to work through that angle with the Stockton Unified School District as well. And so, so I'll follow up with the email. I'll follow up with the email that has all of us in there, and we can have an email chain to collaborate, work on this, and to support the Mama's Cafe and just build off each other. So, Bakari, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to finish that last statement.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, I jumped in with it too soon. Yeah, I want to also add too, and I'm with the Black Rose School Board in Sacramento. And so we've been trying to monitor the implementation of restorative justice practices in the Sacramento School District. And, Nia's right, we're finding that our perception of it or our view of it is not always the same as how they do it, even though we've seen a couple of schools that are making a really good effort. But I think, Dr. Watson, we'd like to see what you all have come up with. I know, I think Tony Tinker works with you, right?
Yes. And
okay.
I would also add the Black Parish School Board also expressed interest in working with us in the grants that I just mentioned. So along with a good number of folks that expressed very strong interest. So even though the grant wasn't funded, I think the idea is still very solid. It would be great to look for resources to try to still get it done.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. Tony is my admin assistant.
Right. So yeah. So as we're trying to, there's been some successes in getting you know the school resource officers or cops off the campus. But now the challenge is going to be to get these programs into the schools, into the districts, and start beginning to change the culture. It's not so gotta change the culture of the schools as well as the society at large. So, but definitely, the Black Girl School Board wants to work with you all on that. Sure.
And also, Brother Bakari, I've been to many of those meetings, and I would like for people to be able to have the opportunity who are in the Sacramento area to help support the Parallel Black School Board. So, how could they be reached, and what information could you give to them for those people who are interested in joining or participating in any future meetings?
Yeah, yeah. You can go on the line. Go online. It's the Black Parallel School Board, and just go online, Google that, and you'll find it. But we meet every month, the first Saturday of each month. Now, I think in January we're gonna meet the second Saturday, but every month we meet the first Saturday. We're meeting online, so you can go in to that website, sign up for the newsletter, and you will get information about the meeting. And you can definitely come in on via Zoom. So Black Parallel School Board in Sacramento.
Thank you very much for that, sir. Thank you very much for that. It sounds like we're making some headway here. We're getting some progress and open opportunities, and those people who are listening, I hope that you can again, like Dr. Wazi is connected at Sac State. I put on the screen as he was talking the website to contact him. Also, might want to contact your look at the websites of your other nearby universities or educational institutions to see what other programs they have available and try to make this happen. And Sacramento has a lot of resources and active people in a lot of different pocketed areas. And, I do like, and she's not on here for some reason. Hopefully Chef comes back, but I'll try to see if she's in the waiting room or anything. But I would like to again go back to controlling the narrative of controlling that narrative and how we can change the imagery, because this is a big machine. The original hip hop version was to bring light of police brutality, XYZ. Then it has been hijacked by mainstream media and controlling that narrative. And I think that the solutions that you hear today to our viewers, I'm just trying to inspire, reaching out, and that you are empowered. You do have the power within you. And it is those lies of the images and things that we picked up along the way that's not ours. And Nia is a counselor. She could talk a little bit more about those lies that we pick up and that we go down. And Summer D, that as you see on the screen, has also kind of shared some of those lies that we picked up. So with this dialogue, if you've gotten this far along in the show, I hope that you see their solutions and don't believe those lies. Because in my experience and what I've seen, and has become one of my movements, is seeing my mom being marginalized. I've seen other really close people in my life being controlled in various ways, and the biggest thing that got them out of that was changing the dialogue within themselves, changing the dialogue of who they are, what they are, and how they see themselves. And we always are haunted by things of our past, are haunted by things in our lives, and sometimes we allow those things to come up. We pick them up. We don't know where we pick them up. It's like walking in the house with your socks on. Next thing you know, they're all dirty. You had no idea where all the dirt came from. And that's kind of our psyche in a way, through things that are being bombarded by us. And I really love what Chef says about taking control of the narratives and not accepting things that may be true, but not accepting that narrative no longer. Nia, and somebody, could you guys chime in? Because you guys are some very strong women. I've known you ladies for a long time, and you are some I'm not trying to be flirtatious, but you guys are very beautiful women, internally and externally. And so, can you help through your experiences in how do people strengthen that internal dialogue to take control of that narrative, and also learn how to encourage them to also reach out to make these type of networks?
Nicole, Mia, did you want to go first, or did you have something?
I can wait.
Okay.
Go for it.
What I found is, in using my own relationship, what I found that I needed to do was to go within myself. And it was a spiritual change, not a religious change. And I think it's really difficult to get people to see how simple that step is, because it is very simple, but it is tedious because it's like a journey, and everybody's journey is going to be different. So when you bring that paradigm to the table, then you got all these different mindsets of how that should look. But it goes back to one of the most simplest things that we ever learned in elementary school: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I mean, if everybody did that, we would just not have any upheavals, period, anywhere, if we all practiced that. And so I think going back to just going within and working out those toxins, and trying to figure out who am I, and then loving myself. After I go in, you love yourself. And when you love yourself, you're less prone to point fingers or to be less empathetic to other people's problems. You're more empathetic to people's problems, to their situations. You can walk away, there's just so much. It spirals, because like it is a very one-on-one individual thing. And I have had, like I said, friends and examples of people that told me their story and tried to feed me that rhetoric when I was, growing up in the church. And they would, I would idolize this one sister because her main testimony was she stayed with her husband all those years while he was beating her. Wow, then he stopped. So that was her big testimony. So, it's like, wow, that's sad, man. That was just a sad situation that they kept trying to make me think was a great thing that she was doing. So, then you have these different approaches. You have the scientific approach, then you have the theoretic approach. Then, I just think that people need to go within. I really do. And I think that is the beginning of them actually knowing themselves.
And that's very painful. That's very, very painful to do. And it's easy to pick up a TV or do something to distract you from that. And I know as a counselor, Ms. Brown, one day soon to be Dr. Brown, hopefully, how do we draw ourselves to the water to drink from our own fountain?
Sometimes we have to play a game with ourselves, and we have to look at everything that we're absorbing and taking in, especially the idiot box, the TV, and we have to ask ourselves, what part of that program is not valuing me? What is throwing me back in my face? Mm-hmm. When I see I've played a game for years. When I see commercials, what is it telling me about myself as an African woman? What is it telling me about African men? What is it telling me about the African family? What is it telling my kids, my students, my stepkids, my grandkids? What is it telling my community about me? And so, as much as I like to talk about hitting things from all different angles, and Darlene talked about going within. And once we go within, we also have to look at what's around us and take.
Who let the dogs out?
You struck a nerve.
Never mind.
You struck a nerve.
No, go ahead. She's got to get the door, but she was on point. Go ahead, Bakari.
Now, I want to just point out real quickly. Summer talked about spirituality within. I know a lot of sisters are struggling. They go to church. Heavy believers. But if you're struggling with that, there's a book called the Ebony Exodus Project by Candace Gorman, and what she talks about, she interviewed a number of women who had left the church, left religion, and Candace Gorman is also a counselor and psychologist, and she talked about this cognitive dissonance that occurs with people in religious things. And what sisters were doing was, because they had this belief in Jesus, they had a low self-esteem of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So they might achieve a lot of great things, but they'll say, well, I'll give it over to Jesus. Mm-hmm. As opposed to saying, no, I did this. Other people helped me in this, right? But when you do that, you start giving over to this spiritual God or what have you, that's a sign of, a lower self-esteem. And so, in cognitive dissonance. So I think that, again, I know women are, and also men, but a lot of women, Black women make up most of the Black church. And this book, the Ebony Exodus Project, is one that's easy to read. It's interviews with women who have left the church, and it's really, really eye-opening. And I think any woman who reads it will find one of those stories relate to her. So just check it out, if you're needing that.
It sounds like what you're saying, and I'm just going to try to say it my way so I have a understanding, and hopefully it might translate to our viewers. It sounds like when you have this within a religious context, and that doesn't mean that religious context necessarily is not connected to the personal relationship somebody may have and a deification of that religion, but it sounds like when I hear you speak of that, it sounds like that people, because of the use of the doctrine, that they always need some kind of intercessor to do something for them instead of doing things for themselves because they feel unworthy, because they have to get to heaven and so forth. And it sounds as if within some of the doctrine that has a lot of beautiful words in there, that a person not is kind of playing the backseat of their salvation, the backseat of their interaction or their situation, because they're relying on an external force. When you're saying that the internal force should actually create power to do things with that inner force, to do things out in the real world, and that those things you should still accredit yourself to do and take power in your life. Am I hearing that correctly?
Exactly. And it's not just you in terms of yourself individually.
Okay.
But recognize what other people do, what community and family do. So that's very important. We don't want to, Western culture is very individualistic. And there's nothing wrong with saying that we all have individual will. I agree, we all have individual will. But at the same time, we should also try to build community and support one another, and not put it on this kind of mystical level, right? And that's
okay.
Me. I'm an open atheist, humanist. Right. I'm not saying everybody should leave the church. That's up to you to decide. But I know I have met many women who struggle in the church, and they don't know who to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason why, we have the Black humanists and non-believers in Sacramento, so that people can come to this meetup and have somebody to talk to. We've had sisters come, because they didn't have any place else to go. Their family, when they left the church, their family, didn't want to be bothered with them. They didn't, they almost disowned them. And so, and I can imagine that contributes to the whole domestic violence as well. When you can't leave out of a situation.
Yep. You don't know where to go.
And I think that's very true in a lot of senses of providing the needs for support and to try to get our situations. And Dr. Wazi, I would love to be invited to the discussion panel or for the one that's happening tomorrow. I've had some experiences myself, and I had taken opportunities to learn to read ancient Greek and Hebrew and access cuneiform, ancient hieroglyphics to try to search for the truth when, the truth is inside of us. I do see that. But I would like to be part of that conversation. And, and I think that has a lot to do with the eternal dialogue, because there are people providing a safe space for people. And there are good people within these organizations, these religious organizations, and some of them are doing really well to help people out. And some of them are taking advantage. And that's kind of saying within the domestic violence issue is that when we see something, we are responsible to say something and to do something about it to change the conditions. And I think that we all need to take that individual ownership. And that's what I'm kind of hearing you saying. And that's kind of what's resonating from what you're saying and some of what Summer's saying here. And, and when you talk about these spaces, I think also, and Dr. Wazi and I had a conversation about, wondering the statistics and what programs are available within prisons if they do have domestic offenses. And one of our guests was supposed to show up, and he's a rabbi within the prison system, and I was wanting to find out more, but it doesn't sound like there are a lot of resources for these individuals to get the help that they need. So when they come back, it gets worse. And it might even lead to death or something. And I know, Nia, you're a counselor, and I think that these spaces are very important, even for the people who are causing those crimes, because also think about the person who's committing these crimes. What I feel sorry for them as well, and that is something that my mother said to me, because she said it was okay for me to share that when she was going through this, and that her healing was being able to, and she's a Christian, strong woman, and she said that she learned how to forgive my father at the time. She came to a place and started feeling sorry for him because he was under it wasn't not a demonic thing, but he had somehow in his life got to the point to where he had to control and felt like he was out of control. So he had to control somebody else. I added a little extra on that. So having these safe spaces that are for atheists, Muslims, Christians, I think are very important. Just having that space that just doesn't look at the religious faith, but look at the individual. And in my mom's situation, I saw some things that were unhealthy, and it did change my view of women in some senses, and how our society grows up. I view women differently from the TV programs I saw. And especially as a black person, a melanated person, the images and the roles that early black actors played in. Blaxploitation is not a great genre for our people, and so I'm going to go back to those safe spaces and looking at those prison programs, but I wanted to add a little bit of, from a male's perspective, what that does. And I posted on here what that does to the children and the brain when they see these things. And thank you. I'm going to post that into our live chat, Ms. Brown, that into our live YouTube feed. Thank you for that. So go ahead and expound on some things. So I think I've elaborated a little further. I don't need to guide you any longer for your response.
So you want a response from me or from the panel?
Well, I was asking you specifically about those, the rehabilitation, coming back, safe spaces, from what you know from your experience in the field.
Well, there's so much going around in my head right now. I'm trying to sift out what I can share that will be of value to this discussion. I always go back to, we need community members that are basically, for lack of a better word right now, assigned to each of the schools or the regions, so that when there is a challenge, the only resource that parents can go to is not considered the NAACP. Not that the NAACP is a bad option, it's just that they're away. There's so many cases they cannot help out or they can't control. And so, what if we had our like Sac State representatives and other community representatives point people for each of the schools when these situations come up and injustice happens all the time, and our kids don't know how to respond because they're taught to be quiet. Mm-hmm. Just like they're taught to sit and read Huckleberry Finn and whatever the other book is that everybody's supposed to read and love. Like, what is it?
Like Sambo?
Yeah, that too. Huckleberry Finn, To Kill a Mockingbird. To swallow and sit there and take it and accept that you're going to be called a nigger and that you're less than and that white folks are in charge and you have no power. And so when students start acting out or when teachers start acting out, there needs to be some place that our students and parents can go, or to an individual. That's not always the school counselor, because sometimes it just isn't, because that relationship is not there. But a community member that can say, okay, here's what we need to do in terms of restorative justice, safe space. What do we even do? How do we even respond to that as parents and as young people? What do they do when they're feeling discriminated against, suppressed, oppressed, backed into a corner? And if they defend, they're considered disrespectful or whatever. The discipline situation happens, or can't touch that parent because that parent is militant, or whatever the word is now. So I still go back to deprogramming what we've learned, and it seems like the port of entry would be our BSU schools. We're trying to get BSUs on every campus, just like we have BSA, Eighth Grade Alliance, on every campus. We need to have our BSU students strong and able to speak out and support each other. And because this committee, whatever it goes into and evolves into, can be a link to those groups in terms of support for our young people and their parents.
That is very well said. And speaking of BSUs, I've always wanted to have the junior colleges connect to the universities and have a BSU mentorship for the university students, for the state students who are in college, to be able to help them transition from junior college into college and into a higher education system.
Every Los Rios campus has a Black Student Union-like group. I think for CRC, it's Umoja, I think is what it's called, community group. But every Los Rios campus has a group that Black students can go to and be a part of. And Dr. Ed Bush over at CRC, Edward Bush, he is committed big time to illuminating those groups and supporting our students. And Elk Grove also has a new commitment to help our students as well.
With that said, is there any uniformity or any structure in place? Because I can see it going from the universities all the way down to the high schools and being able to use some of these student leadership, student unions through there's universities all the way down to the high schools and into the elementaries in a mentorship program. Is there any efforts like that happening now that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, but the time is prime. Time is prime. Strike while the iron is hot.
Yes, ma'am. I agree. And I think that's something that we should, hopefully try to include in this program with the safe spaces, is developing leaders within the community. So as some leaders are helping the youth, the younger kids, we have them being mentored by something a little higher. And I'm not sure about sororities and fraternities and how well they work in leadership in those programs and how that works. I'm not part of that system, but I do know that from what I understand, they do have a person that you report to that's supposed to help mentor you within some of those systems. And so I like these ideas that are being generated.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. Does anybody want to comment on something that's already been said or and mention something that they didn't get opportunity to speak on?
I wanted to ask you a question, Nehesu. You had mentioned that you had suffered some abuse at the hands of a woman, and I wanted to know, I wanted you to. You
wanted me to open up my heart, okay?
I want you to elaborate on it.
Okay, well, what I saw when I was a kid, I saw my father, do some very aggressive things in behavior and language, with her. And I witnessed that. My mother never, I don't think she never abused me in any way. I wasn't a victim of abuse from her, but there was a neighbor who was, I was being bullied in a sense, I guess, abused by a teenager when I was a youth, in my early years, and that shaped and tarnished my character. And it took a long time to get through when I was able to develop the language to communicate what was happening to me and make sense of it. Because oftentimes kids don't have the language or be able to know how to process it because their brains haven't developed that. And so my mom didn't abuse me, but I saw the aggressiveness of my dad. And my dad, admitted his mistakes later in life. They got a divorce when I was 5. And I remember some of those images when I was 4 and 5 at that age. And so my dad later, when I reconnected after the divorce, I never, in his other relationships, I never saw that. And I lived with him. I never saw that with my stepmother or anybody else, you know. And so that was something that, but one thing I know, someone really close to me, and me researching and preparing for the show, I know somebody very close to me that was overseas, and they were in Baghdad and Iraq, and the way that those individuals see women as possessions, they offered to buy that individual, that female that I know very close. They offered to purchase her multiple times, and they're like, "What are you talking about? Well, you can't buy this woman. This is not what we do." And so, changing the viewpoint of people and perception, I think, is with education is that's a world issue, but dealing with things matters at home. It just is eye opening to me. This topic is very brand new and opened up a lot of wounds and a lot of reflective times that I really had to meditate and just like not let it go, but just process it and say to myself, that hurts. I need that to hurt. I need that pain right there for a second. And my wife and I had a great conversation, and it just drew us closer together because we have a healthy relationship. And so, so it wasn't my mother that abused. It's just being around other aggressive things. Dr. Wazi, you had something to share?
Yeah, the earlier conversation and the question you raised about forgiveness and the prison, I think, very poignant. And restorative justice, one of the moral or one of the cornerstones or elements is forgiveness. Unconditional forgiveness, really. Being mindful of people's limitations. Some may get there sooner or later than others, and some may never get there. My mother always tells us, "Yeah, you forgive, but you may not necessarily forget." Right? My priest, one of the times I had a conversation with him, talked about, yes, you forgive, but you become wiser. The next time with whoever in that relationship that may be. But the forgiveness is, as you talked about your mother and being forgiving of your dad, not only for her own sake, but also for the sake of your dad. I think is very, very important. I have a monthly dialogue on restorative justice with a group of inmates at Folsom Prison, the new Folsom or California State Prison in Sacramento. And I take my students, my criminal justice students, in my restorative justice class to the dialogues. We've been doing it for about 4 or 5 years now, face-to-face until COVID-19, but we're now doing it virtual, basically online, homework and write-ups. And I give my students some of the write-ups. One of the topics on forgiveness. And it's interesting when the students read those things and give feedback to the inmates. And these are inmates that have probably committed the worst crimes you can think of. And they reached out to me to work with them to come to terms with their behavior and how to make amends, to apologize, to express their remorse to the victims of their crime. Some of them may never come out. Of the 24, 26, 30 or so inmates, I'm now in the second cohort, in the second year of the second cohort. 80% of them are, Black, African American males. And each of them will tell you that they have been victimized in their lives by somebody. So it's this concept of, hurt people, hurt other people, to some extent. So the point is that there is enough room for forgiveness. There's enough need for forgiveness to go around. And one of the things I tell them is that if you're asking somebody to forgive you, you have to first of all forgive yourself, right? You may not have control over another person forgiving or not forgiving you, but you have more control about forgiving yourself. And until you do that, you would, even if another person forgives you, will never come to terms with it. So the first step for me in terms of restorative justice and my own practical applications is, if you're asking somebody to forgive you, you have to be able to forgive yourself first. This is, very, very important. 99% of the time, the people we send to prison come out. And the studies indicate clearly that when they come out in much worse shape than they were going in. Right? They are more likely to repeat the offense, and even at a more serious level than what got them there in the first place. Even though there have been a series of efforts in the past few years to bring about true correction, right? California moved from CDC to CDCR, who added their rehabilitation to emphasize the importance of it. But over 70% of those go back within 1 year of returning from prison. So to the extent we can do our level best to not even get them there in the first instance. And I think this is where some of these healthy peace circles that we're talking about can add a lot of value to prevent them from getting there, because we know once you come in contact with the formal criminal justice system, it has a deleterious impact in terms of causing one to reoffend at a more serious stage in terms of recidivism.
Wow. That's why. Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. I really think that's really interesting that you point out for your students forgiveness, and you make that an element within your course. And thank you for your hard work in doing that. That's tremendous. I wish I was still in school to participate in your class. And you said that you had people that actually when they asked you to take you through that process, and that's what Nia Brown was getting to before she someone let the dogs out. But what are some of the steps that you take them through to help them to forgive themselves, so that they could forgive the person who they who's to forgive? Period. Can you share a little bit about that assignment with the students and that process that you take them through?
Yeah, of course. I asked them first of all. Once these inmates, they reached out to me. They invited me to work with them through referrals and reading about my work. So my first meeting with them was why, all right, not just me, but why do you want to go through this process? Because there is a process of discovery that you may not like, right? Part of that is coming to terms with what happened, what you did, and why you did it, and your full understanding of the impact on that side. And that takes quite a combination of discussions, role plays, critical thinking, to go through that process. And it is a 2.5 year process. And then we have them go through the specific person or persons that they may have harmed, killed, raped, robbed, whatever the situation may be. And they take turns critiquing each other's discussions in the role plays. Do role reversals, and the power of peer learning cannot be underestimated here. Where you may have two people that have done probably the worst things you can think of, but it can be when they take the different role of a victim and an offender, right? One person plays the role of the victim, another person plays the role of the offender. They query each other. They come to some real discoveries that normally they wouldn't. As I said, a lot of reflection, a lot of reading and critiquing and giving them feedback. More importantly, valuing them as human beings who have redeeming values that we can appreciate and try to rehabilitate. So it is a very tedious, serious process, but it takes some time for sure. And for some of my students have want to go back, right? These are young, impressionable, oftentimes students who are often the first time going to prison, have all kinds of images about who a criminal is, especially when I tell them that you are going to be meeting, murderers and rapists and so on and so forth, the people that have committed the worst things. And they go in and with a certain sense of apprehensiveness for sure. But we go in, we sit in a circle. Everybody is the same in a circle. We interact, share, and they come back, and some of them have a totally different image or change of their perspective about the inmates. That they're actually people who are human beings, who have intelligence, who can reason, and sometimes reason much at a higher level than they are themselves. And some of them want to go back to continue to learn because they also have some of them have their own issues with their families. I remember a young man who said, I had hated my father forever because he was abusive toward my mother. And when he was very glad that they divorced, and he had never spoken with the father for over 15 years, all right? But after going through this process, he came to the power of forgiveness and was willing to go and re-engage or reconnect with the father. Or a young African-American woman saying, growing up at 20 years of age, I know in my family, there was this uncle everybody talked about that was in prison. I had never met him, but he was always present, was part of the discussion in the family. But after going through this process, I'm writing a letter to this uncle, and I'm going to encourage my family to try to visit him in prison. All right. So these are some of the discoveries that people go through. Again, I don't want to suggest that it's easy or it happens all of a sudden or it happens for everyone. But our restorative justice, even if it's one person that is saved, it has the potential to save multiple souls.
And about that process, Ms. Brown, could you talk a little bit about what the brain goes through and what he described? And thank you, Dr. Wazi. That's very motivating to me. I love it. Please incorporate me in more work that you do on this. I'm learning more about you. You're an amazing man. Ms. Brown, could you tell us in some of the things that he described, what does the brain physically go through and the different types of, we have different kinds of, synaptic gaps and neurons. What does a brain actually go through in this process when somebody is facing, role playing, going through all of this to be restored in this practice? No oigo.
All right. I honestly don't know that I can answer that intelligently because, in all transparency, I was not aware that I was going to be speaking, pulling expertise out this evening. However, I know, right? I know when students are pulled into the circle versus being ostracized, there's automatically going to be that sense of community that is not, it's not always there at the school. It seems like it is, but if you're constantly hearing that what you're doing, saying, thinking, being, coming to school, looking like is not okay, whether it's on purpose or it's just part of, it's just woven into society, then you don't have that sense of being included in the community of the school or in that circle or in that group. So when you participate in restorative justice, it allows you that opportunity to be a part of. I think automatically, whether we want to admit it or not, to whatever degree, as folks of color, we are on the fringes, we're marginalized unless we either destructively or constructively push ourselves into the center of attention or part of the circle. And we know how children do that, and we know how some adults do that as well. So when are we going to be able to be a part of the circle without forcing our way in or doing something negative to get into that circle? And I truly believe that this society is just addicted to making us the scapegoat. No matter what we do, say, think, come in, damn if you do, damn if you don't. If you sit there, you're dumb. If you talk and participate, you're arrogant, or you think you're all that. So our students absorb all that, and there's their campaign, the media, the news coverage, all of those things have to change. But meanwhile, how do we in our schools and our communities, how do we get our children to feel like they are a part of the mainstream, whatever that is supposed to be? Because my mainstream is my mainstream, but when I go to work, I may not be mainstream.
Yeah, that's what's up. And to answer kind of the question, and I've opened up a school to try to respond to the prison pipeline, and using wraparound services and developing safe space for kids. We talked about going within and meditating. There's a good book called Brain Wars. I read it a long time ago, and it talked about the brain matter, the gray brain matter or the white brain matter, and having that space. And then we talked about space. People having that space allows for the gray brain matter to develop, and that just helps, like the fatty tissue around, that just helps to keep focus. And I think a lot of our home and our parenting, our parents that are struggling and that may be going through this, there's not opportunity for that piece to be able to make the brain heal because it's plastic. I'm only speaking from my passion to learn, my passion to understand why we think we learn the way that we think, how can we heal? Because I've gone through my own healing, my own trauma, and it's trauma which we have, and the brain is implied with a stress response in the amygdala and hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. Traumatic stress can be associated with lasting changes in the brain areas. Traumatic stress is associated with the increase of cortisol and norepinephrine responses and the subsequent stressors. Now, I know I'm reading this, but this is something I know. I didn't know the parts of the brain. But when we talk about the also, it shows information on, it shows a response on the hippocampal anterior cingulate volumes. Now, the anterior cingulate volume, part of your brain, is a part of your brain where you make informational decisions, where you take in information and you process it. And then you also have a part of the right amygdala, and that one's response out of fear. And science has shown people can tell if you're conservative or liberal based on those two parts of your brain. More liberal, lower, lower anterior cingulate, and more of people who are conservative tends to have a higher amygdala, right amygdala brain, and talk about brain activity with CAT scans. And and a lot of release of cortisol, and exercise is very important and part of this. So my point in all of this is about you can change yourself. It takes time, it takes peace, it takes way to find within, even in chaos, you can find within yourself to visualize your problems and see yourself solving the problems and having a different emotional response. And you have to get that cortisol out of your system. And this trauma adds so much to the way just your physical brain and your muscle memory holds this in. And so with the things that the things that you just explained and the things that Dr. Awazi's talking about is providing your brain opportunities to create neural pathways and to exercise different parts of the brain, to develop more compassion. And those people who are very afraid in inflated with a higher brain activity in their right amygdala, they process information when they have that fear in them. And we talked about, that's why I was talking, when we talk about fear-based religions, fear-based doctrines, fear-based anything, a person will process that information through that part of their brain to see, first of all, the first response is, am I safe? Mm-hmm. Am I accepted? Am I part of a community? And so those people really value some things differently. And the other people when it talks about the cingulate, the gyrocingulate, that's the processing of information. And those people who have trauma in that area, they're not able to process information as quickly as they need be in situations. And oftentimes they're so focused on fear-based situations that it really clouds their judgment. And so I just wanted to bring some science into that, because I've done some research and looking at the brain and how the brain is plastic. You could really change who you are. You could change a lot of who you are, and we have the power to do that. And I think that the practices Dr. Awazi has his students go through is empowering, because those people, they get to see their brain is changing as they play different roles, and he's asking them reflective questions. And I think the safe spaces that we brought up and the mentorship helps us to do that. And I just, with all bringing this together and coming to a close of our show, that we have the power and we have the ability within ourselves, regardless of what you believe or don't believe, you have the power within yourself to physically change your brain, to physically change how you heal, and to change the way you think. And some people, they're not as emotional as other people. And some people are way more emotional, but still, you still have the power. And what's very important for individuals is to be able to have that safe space. And if you don't have that safe space, you need to find that safe space. And it's hard to. I understand. People can lock down credit cards. They hold money above you. They have emotional holds on you. But first off, stop believing some of those lies and go into these safe spaces and have conversations, because everybody is valuable, everybody is worthy, and everybody deserves to enjoy this beauty and this gift, if you see it as a gift. But it is a gift, in certain ways, or just this experience in life, to have the opportunity to not have inhibitors in the way of enjoying your existence, your being, your self-being. And so, I really am grateful for Dr. Awazi, reaching out and asking me to facilitate a conversation. And I want to thank the panelists, especially, and Summer and Safinsa for expressing their coming out here and sharing your story, because it's hard, it hurts, but you guys are strong women, and I think hopefully that people from any walk of life can see your strength and eventually see that it took a while to get there. And any man that's watching this can see that the damage that could be caused on your children and that you might be hurting is why you're hurting others. And it is cyclical if you don't take care of it. It's like the DNA strands. It goes round and round. You can alter DNA, alter DNA in negative ways. And you have the opportunity, men, to change your lives as well, and that you're worth more than the dollar paychecks that you bring, because you bring to your children, your women, and your young men the identity of who they are. And when you take out that identity of who they are, they're going to be less lost. And women who step up into those roles are even way more powerful. And I really am thankful for those strong women and men in those lives. And that's my soapbox that I want to say. And in closing, I would like to go ahead and offer anybody anything they want to suggest. And we've been adding comments. I've been adding comments into the live YouTube feed. And I want you to go back and take a look, because I did throw in some websites and stuff like that as we were talking, highlighting Dr. Wazi's website and some of the links you guys have been putting in here. So Dr. Wazi, please go back and check out the live stream. But is there anything the panel would like to share in closing with?
Quickly, Brother Hesu, great job. Thank you very much. I don't know if you got the link for the survey for people to complete and give us feedback. We appreciate that from Tony. If you can share that with our participants and panelists
She sent me an email.
Give us it was an email from Tony yesterday with the link for the survey, please. Yeah.
Yes, I will do that.
Please, I appreciate that. We can let us know what you think about this session and what we think about improvement and new programs will be most appreciated.
Yeah, and whether or not we want to, I would love to be able to, Dr. Wazi, to continue this platform with you and any other work. This is amazing.
Yes. I would add a couple of things. This grant that we have officially comes to an end in a couple of days. However, there is a possibility of an extension under the new COVID relief bill that I think the president signed yesterday. That extends it for about one more year. But the city of Sacramento has to agree to extend that. If that happens, that will definitely provide an opportunity probably to go back and ask for more money and more funding from the city to probably do more work in this regard. So, stay tuned. We also do have a group of service providers, counselors, therapists who are professionals. And will receive services at no cost under this particular grant. So just email CAPCR@csus.edu.
Say that again slower.
Yeah, CAPCR@csus.edu or 916-278-6282.
And you can you can also find some of those links in the description of this live YouTube chat. To be able to access the website, which was shown on the show. Please continue, Dr. Wazi. Just want to share that.
Yes, please. Yeah. So just basically let us know if you think of anybody that needs help to talk to a counselor going through some of these difficulties we're talking about here. We definitely will follow up with that person as well. And I look forward to continuing this discussion and maybe the proposals that we have discussed today to take it to the next level. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I'll follow up with the email chain, with the survey, and maybe we can have that email thread to collaborate efforts in developing resources not only for women but potentially children and continuing the safe spaces. So I will follow up with the email, sir. Anyone else would like to chime in on something? And as we close, I just want to make sure we address anything that pops up in your mind and everything. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I just want to give an invitation. The Black Pearl School Board is going to be holding a parent participation day in February, and so go to the website. There'll be some information up there in a couple of weeks. And the reason why I say that is because it's really important that we get involved in the schools of our children, right? And participate, observe, particularly while you're on Zoom, doing Zoom classes. Observe what's going on. You don't have to go in and comment all the time. You just kind of want to observe what's going on. And one of the things that you saw tonight in the discussion is we have a particular language about we need to be able to share that with other people so they'll have that language as well and know what to look for and talk about how do we make change. So restorative justice is very important both in schools and in the community But we have to understand what it's about, educate each other about what's the best restorative justice practices, and see how they can be put into the schools and the community. Actually, we need, entire curriculums that are based upon restorative justice practices. And because we live in that kind of society that's a society is very negative, very violent, and it influences our behavior, people's behavior. And so just that was my attitude. But the main kind of, practical thing is to try to participate in your kids' school, observe what's going on, get to know the teachers, get to know the curriculum, and then we can come to the Black Royal School Board, we can talk about the things that need to be changed.
Thank you, sir. As you said that, I just threw up not threw up, I hate to say that, I just put on the screen um, the website, and I just showed it to the audience members, the information you shared. So they should be able to contact them now that they have the domain name. So I put that up there. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that there is a connection that we can make with the umbrella that we have here on this panel tonight. Thank you, sir. So that was on the screen.
Thank you, too. Thank you for putting this together.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nia, Miss D. Oh, she can sing, by the way. I ain't trying to put her on the spot, but this girl can sing. So, I'm just saying, I got to hook you up with Safensa, because she's into music and she has an awesome video that I got to play on our podcast. But Miss Brown, Miss Dahlia, you guys have it? Darlene, do you have anything you guys would like to share on the way out?
No, just thank you for asking me to participate. And like I said, my situation pales to other people. I can't really say that I was in a totally domestic abusive situation, you know what I mean? But there were incidents, but I'm just grateful to have taken my journey within and have become the person that I am today.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And in your situation, I know that it took you from your walk and your journey, that empowering yourself and trusting in yourself and the powers that be, that you now have a healthy, positive relationship with your ex-husband and co-parenting your beautiful son.
That's right. Yeah, and I have a great relationship with my son, because I walked him through that. I didn't bash his dad. I'm always standing up and telling him, you respect your dad. Whatever happens, you respect your dad. You talk positively to your dad. So, I tried to keep that separate, although he saw enough when he was young. And that was one of the things that I wanted to separate from that, him being able to see the anger in his dad toward me, because I didn't want my son to carry that out in his relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're navigating this ship pretty well.
Yeah, and he's out. He's graduated high school.
Yeah. He's 23 years old.
23-year-old took you out for your birthday.
Oh no, pardon me.
Took you out for your birthday.
Yeah, it took me. We went in nature. I love nature. If you ever can't find me, go to some park and find me.
That's beautiful.
But I love nature. We went out. It was cold that day too. December 17th was a cold day. But we went out there. I just enjoyed being with my son, and he enjoys being with me, and we have a great relationship. We have a lot of fun. We laugh a lot, and we support each other.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm glad. That gives me a lot of hope. That gives us a lot of hope. So
Absolutely.
I believe that your energy, those people who are questioning themselves will most definitely, I think you've spoken to their lives and give them hope again. You continue to touch mine as you always do, and my children. So thank you for our personal relationship and your strength.
Absolutely. And specifically my nephew.
Oh, she loves my son, that's for sure. She loves him because he's he's good. Yeah, yes, for sure. I'll let him know that that Auntie Darlene, you guys have a connection. I love it. I love it. We gotta have a dinner when we get back. We have to have everybody together and celebrate life.
That's right.
Yes. Thank you for coming and your energy and love and your strength and the belief in yourself. Miss, thank you. Ms. Brown, how would you like to give us some last words before we
Yes,
head on
so
out?
I just want to say thank you for
And I
being
want
in
to
the
say, I just want to say, I did tell you you won't be on the panel, though. I'm just saying that,
Did you?
but I thought I did, but I've been, I'm probably sitting in my head anyways, but but yeah,
still adjusting to the new job.
that's
But
just me. Yeah, but continue to say thank you. I heard some thank yous in there. I love
thank
those type of
you
phrases.
to you for just the invitation and staying in contact. I appreciated your wisdom when we were working with the students with BSU at our schools. So it's awesome to stay connected, reconnect online. Also, of course, with Darlene and Bakari. And I think I've I think I've heard Dr. Uwazi's name. So it's good to see you. It's good to see your face and to meet you, albeit virtually. And this is a super important topic. Obviously, we're all here, and it impacts our communities tremendously because we are still hiding, I think, from a lot of it. And I think we also we have to start. This is a whole new another topic, but I know most of you probably aware. We have to look at the fact that our students' rate of suicide is going up amongst kids of color, and especially Black kids. And I think it ties together. Domestic abuse is that outward, that internal but outward. It's inside your house, but you're acting out, and that impacts our kids' psyche and their bandwidth for what they can take.
That's right.
So I'm really encouraged to meet up with the 5 of you, the 6 of you, on this call. It's very, I don't even have the words because I had no idea who was going to be on other than Nehesu. And so it's awesome to see you and to work with you in this space. And I hope that we can continue to stay in contact and to spread the web of our connections with our kids and our families.
Thank you for
So
those.
thank
you for your participation.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, see, I'm on the East Coast. It's 11 p.m. over here. I'm coming back to Cali. I'm coming back to Cali.
I thought you were here in Elk Grove.
No. I stay in Oak Park. But yeah, I just left the Capitol. I was at the Capitol, saw a whole bunch of, I'm over here in Virginia. We have plantations. I was in Maryland. And it's what we see on TV is not what is actually happening on the ground. And I'm thankful that what we see, like again, those messages. I'm so glad that it's not happening what I see on TV because I thought everything around here was racist. But oh my gosh, so people are so beautiful out here. It's so loving. I'm like, hold on, this is nothing like I seen in the movies. This ain't Birth of a Nation out here. You know what I mean? It's beautiful. So so thank you for your.
Stay safe. Travel safe.
All right,
Yeah.
audience.
Happy holidays, everyone. Happy
Audience members. I'm going to play an outro.
All right. Peace.
Yes.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Peace, family.
Is it just me and you again? What the heck?
Yeah, I've got an outro video that I'm doing, and so I'm gonna play that. And it was I'm just gonna play that, and then I'm headed out to go play with the kids.
Are you still on YouTube right now?
Yes, it is. And I'm after this. I'm closing out, dear. You can call me.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. exit.